Hey everyone, we are proud to be a part of the W2M network and wanted to take a quick moment to give you an update regarding the W2M network feed. If you've subscribed to the Source Material Comics feed, nothing will change. However, due to some new policies by Spreaker, if you listen to us on the W2M Net podcast feed, along with all of the other great W2M Net shows, that feed will soon cease to exist. Shows like the Rattlich and Broadcasting Network, Video Games to the Max, Talk the Keki, and others in the description of this episode will still have their own dedicated feeds, so punch in their name in your podcatcher and subscribe. Alright, on with the show. What's going on, everybody? Hey, real quick, before we get into this episode, we recorded this, and one of the criticisms I'll mention later is about how outlandish the story is, and what I just learned almost a month later after recording this episode is that it was based on a true story. So, as we get into the episode here, talking about the fourth man, just remember, I did my research, I just did it a little late. Enjoy the show, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Comics Podcast. I am your host, Jesse Starcher, and this evening, it's the third in a trilogy of Mark Rattlich specials. That's right. Mark Rattlich said, hey, I've got to talk some books. Mark Rattlich, this is the third book that we have decided to discuss, and that is called The Fourth Man, written by Jeff McComsey, Mike Deodato Jr. on art, colored by Lee Loffridge, lettered by Steve Wands. This came out from AWA Studios, Upshot. I don't know if that's the imprint or if that's part of the name of the publisher. Released last year, as a matter of fact, January of 2022.
We talked about in the first episode that you hate me and refuse to record with me, so I begged you. And I was like, here's a bunch of books that I'm reading. Please tell me what to read, Daddy. And you were like, read these 3 books that are all in the crime genre. And I went, all right, that makes a degree of sense. So of all the books that the stack of unread comics that I was telling you about, you're like, hey, let's read these 3 off the beaten path independent crime books. And this was the third one, called The Fourth Man. And it goes like this. And this is probably my favorite of the 3. 3 murders, 25 grand, or best offer. Honestly, this is a fucking screenplay pitch. Okay? This comic book isn't a comic book. It is absolutely, but this is totally somebody's screenplay pitch.
Oh, yes.
3 dead bodies lay in a rural morgue, all murdered in the span of 2 days. It's up to 2 detectives from opposite sides of the track to determine who put them there. If the murders are linked in what, if anything, they have to do with a pair of dueling car dealerships. A dark comedy mystery thriller by Jeff McComsey, who did Grendel and Kentucky, and Mike Deodato Jr. You should note that Deodato Jr. sounds familiar, Jesse.
Yeah, he's Spider-Man artist, if I remember correctly.
Yes, Amazing Spider-Man and The Resistant. Right. That is inspired by an outlandish true crime story. The Fourth Man will keep you guessing to the last page. What I love, my favorite thing about this book is that they went to the trouble of already casting. Now, I don't know how that's going to work because they casted Harvey Keitel from Reservoir Dogs.
Right.
They casted Regina King from the 90s. Morgan Freeman. This has got, what's his face? The Tuna from Blow.
Paul Giamatti.
It's got, Paul Giamatti from American Splendor. Like, this book has, like, time travel casting in it.
Oh, yeah.
But I love it. I love it for that reason, that, like, they went with sort of photorealistic art for some of these characters, and these are right out of, what's his name? The kid from Breaking Bad's in this.
Jesse Pink, the guy that plays Jesse Pink. Oh, shit.
Yeah, he plays the other Nazi in this one.
Aaron Paul.
Aaron Paul. Something like that. I love the idea that they went out of their way to make this look like it was like a real movie.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah. So when I popped this book open, put all that in quotes, first thing that I noticed was like the cover is a straight up movie poster. I'm like, okay, they are not, when you said that this is a screenplay, it's not like you're saying that in a sense of like, hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is my comic. It should be made into a movie. No, these motherfuckers are like, hey, this is a movie as a comic.
So that variant cover for issue number 1. So it's this pancake. Someone made a pancake face. It has got blueberry eyes and a buttered nose and bacon frown with a bullet in the head with ketchup blood.
Oh, nice.
And eggs for hair. This is fantastic. Okay, yeah, okay. So Egg Brain.
Egg Brain, nice.
That's a teaser poster.
That's
the 6 months before the movie comes out. When you're walking through the theater, that's the poster you see.
Right. So you know that this is exactly what they're going for, and they're not shy with the actors, portraying the characters in this book. I mean, it's clearly something that he was trying to do.
Do you remember when we reviewed and we had the artist and the writer on for Welcome to Planet Wrestling or whatever the fuck it was called. WrestleTopia. And he was like, I actually wrote a screenplay and no one bought it. So I took my screenplay and turned it into a comic in the hopes that someone would see the comic and option it.
Right.
That's what this feels like.
Yeah. If you're not going to get it, at least you've got, look, folks, it's, this is what it would be if it was a movie. I think that's a great concept. And I saw a lot of criticism for it because people were saying that he's just straight up copying these people's faces. He's tracing them. I'm like, I don't know about all that. There is definitely a photorealistic kind of feel to this. Have you ever heard or seen the movie A Scanner Darkly with Keanu Reeves, where it's it's kind of, it looks animated, it's cell shaded, but the actors are actually portraying in the, they're actually in the movie, but it's very much got this kind of like animated feel. That's what this reminds me of. It's kind of like, oh, hey, I'm seeing this realistic stuff. Like you open up the issue, there's a car parked as the detectives are getting out of the car. That looks like almost a photo of a car. So the fourth man, the purpose of it being titled that is there are 3 bodies initially that these detectives are coming into Medford, PA to investigate. They've shown up, they're dead. You mentioned this kind of in what you were reading. There's some dueling car dealerships, which, boy, that's interesting. I mean, we got a murder coming out of a plot dealing with 2 car dealerships, one upset with the other. But the one that feels slighted puts a hit out on the owner of the other car dealership, who is definitely more successful than the other one, maybe driving the other one out of business. But regardless, that's kind of where this is where it all begins. He puts this hit out, and Paul Giamatti is like a detective who's taken the money to go and do this, but it all continues to kind of, essentially, we're getting the backstory on why we have these 3 bodies in the first 3 issues. And then by the 4th issue, we have the 4th body, the 4th man that shows up dead, causing the detectives to go and continue to investigate this. This was a good story. I will tell you that, I mean, you loved the fact that they were using actors to put this on the page, or the actors' likenesses, which I don't know if they've got permission or if anybody's ever said a word. I doubt anybody said a word to anybody about, hey, you're in this comic. But you felt that added to the comic, right?
It gave an element to the book that I don't think a lot of comics have because, they tend to go, I think, overboard with some of the art in drawing people because they tend to ugly them up or they didn't do this, that, It's a lot of fantasy bleeding into their conceptualization where this, I feel like because they focused on, I felt like I was watching storyboards for a movie, which again, I always look at some of the books that we read and think like, what would I do if I was adapting this? And here, some of that work was done for me. So, I jokingly in one of our previous shows talked about mental loads because that's what's been on my mind as of late. But like in terms of just focusing like the mental load of reading a book and thinking and what that does with your imagination, I didn't have to think about what these characters look like anymore, or who would play them.
Or you can even hear their voices.
I heard Harvey Keitel. Like, can I tell you how many times, like, when he was talking about lighting the cigarette, I just wanted to hear him go, I'm hungry, let's get a taco.
The first moment that I realized, oh my goodness, this has definitely some actors' likenesses in it was when I saw Paul Giamatti. I didn't even recognize Harvey Keitel or Regina King initially. I see Paul Giamatti's face as the dead man that's laying on the coroner's table, and I'm like, whoa, wait a second. There's no way that's not Paul Giamatti. And then
I was totally picturing Regina King from like the Watchmen TV show on HBO. Like I thought, and I could hear her voice. And so when I was talking about mental load, I was focusing more on the story and not on how do these characters sound in my head? Right. What are who would play them in the story? Like those things that I would typically think about, but despite myself, were gone. I didn't have to anymore. And I could really just focus on the story in and of itself, which I think is good. I think this has a really good cinematic quality to it in that these are almost compartmentalized stories. So it's like a 4 rooms kind of a thing. And so what links the 4 rooms together? What's the unifying factor? And in the case of the 4 rooms, it was the bellhop. But in this particular case, it's a murder mystery. You have these seemingly unconnected murders, but they are connected. What's the connection? That's the mystery. And it's my one criticism of the book. There's so much time spent on laying out these elaborate murders and really getting very creative and in depth with the details. And then she just kind of figures it out at the end. She's like, oh, I got it. And she corners Aaron Paul. They're in like a standoff and the book ends. That's
a great ending, in my opinion. I love the ending to this book. Did you want a resolution between those two?
I don't want to say yes because then Robert Winfrey will run into the room and hit me. Why do you have to have everything the same, Rattledge? Why do you have to have, linear storytelling and tight resolutions? So no, it can be absolutely vague and, whatever. Everything's fine. Relativism and anarchy is the way to go. It's fine. I'm currently pouting. Yes, I wanted a resolution. God damn it! Everything typed up in a neat bow in a box.
That is exactly what my wife would say if we were watching this movie.
Wife, her head's about to fall off. She's nodding vociferously.
Mindy would have been watching this movie with me, and Regina King would have been reaching for her weapon while Aaron Paul's reaching for his. And when the credits rolled, my wife would look over at me and she would say the classic line, "That was stupid." That's what I would hear.
You should go hang out with Melissa, and I'll hang out with Mindy.
She hated it. She would have hated it. I love that open-ended feel of like, oh man, what are we going?
It seems so fucking cheap and lazy, though.
And but the thing is, it leaves it up.
Run out of pages?
Why do you need that completed in your mind? Why can't you yourself be like, okay, well, I want this to end this way, and let your mind do it?
Fucking literally edged. That's why. I need to finish.
Oh, you don't like that. You don't like the fact that they're the writer or creator is doing this to you.
I get worked up, and finally, when I'm ready for release, it's like, all right, we're done now.
Okay.
Do you like that? Do you like that? Do you like being worked up, and right before you're ready to explode, we're done here?
I like a creator's use. I like a creator's use of leaving a story open-ended so that a viewer can make their own assumptions of how they wanted it to end or how it should have been.
It's fine. Yeah, you know what? You know how Star Wars should have ended, Jesse? Luke fires the shot, the 1 in a million shot, and the screen just goes black. With heroes, satisfying ending, whatever. What would have been great? At the end of Avengers Endgame, after Thanos just blew up the Avengers compound, everyone gets out of the compound, and right before Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America fight Thanos, it just says Finn.
Okay. There are some stories that require resolution, and there are some stories that are fine without it, or to leave open for another chapter.
I legit thought they ran out of pages in the book and that there's like a missing issue.
That I could see, because it does look like, oh my gosh, they're getting ready to throw down. It's great. I mean, great use of the dialogue where she's like, hey, I've got a question for you. And they're both reaching for the gun, and he's like, shoot.
Fade to black.
That's where fade to black. I love it. I think it's great. I think it's a perfect way to end.
Without being a brat, there needed to be one more panel. Instead of I have the trade here. It shows one of the issue covers. It's like a newspaper clipping. It says issue 104, used car shot. Instead of that, there need to be one more panel, and it's just black, and you hear bang.
Okay.
I would have been okay with that.
So that, and the fact that you don't know who shot what.
Yeah, I mean, at least then, if you're trying to do kind of like a ode to Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs ends, because I'm stuck in the Harvey Keitel thing. Reservoir Dogs ends. I don't know if you've ever seen it. The screen goes to black. You hear the cops enter the warehouse where the whole movie takes place.
And then there's a shootout, right?
And there's shots fired, but you don't know what happens because they faded to black.
Right.
That's acceptable.
Interesting that you like that type of an ending, which still leaves things open.
It does, because that's not the point of the movie. The point of the movie is not whether or not they're going to get away. The point of the movie was that it was like is this experiment with giving you the details of an event that you never see through the dialogue and through flashbacks and whatnot.
Okay. All right. I'm sitting here thinking about, I love the fact that by the way, Kaleidoscope, I wanted to participate in that, and I got to looking at the schedule, and I'm recording with Dean and Derry that night. But I know that you chose the chronological order of watching that show.
Because that's the order it should be watched in.
Well, I'm not here to argue that. Trust me.
There's only one way to watch television and movies, Jesse, chronologically.
But I love the concept. Really does hit home when I think about that. The fact that you do get a resolution through most of what you're, as you're watching this. And for me, the resolution happened not chronologically. Like I got my answers the way that I watched it, which was not chronologically, which is interesting. And you, sir, you will be satisfied when you watch this chronologically. And I know that you chose that because you felt like we need a beginning, we need a middle, and we need an end. And the best way to get that is through the date, through watching it as it falls.
Yeah, that's what used to annoy me about watching The Witcher, was it jumped all over the place, and like it didn't occur to me until the very end of the first season what was happening. And while I enjoyed The Witcher first season, it annoyed me for that reason.
So okay. I mean, it made me think of that because this doesn't have much of a resolution. And granted, with Kaleidoscope, you're going to get that resolution, but I think the way that I watched it would have annoyed the shit out of you because of what you're thinking. There were time jumps all over the place. It's not kind of a great example because I do end up getting all my answers to the questions. Here you don't. You don't get much of an answer as to who's going to win the battle, and I still think that works. Like if they would have taken the final episode out of Kaleidoscope, there would have been some open questions for me if I would have never got to watch that final episode that I had it in the way that I had it set up. So anyway, and would I have hated it? I don't know. I don't know if I would have hated the fact that I had all these questions. I think, again, it's something that a creator does to allow the person that's experiencing it to have a little bit more of an experience with the book itself. Not everything has to be in a neat bow, Mark Radulich. So, all right, let me get back to what I was talking about here. The flow of the story to me felt great. I mean, I thought that everything...
Like I said, it felt episodic. See, I don't see this as a movie. I definitely see this as a show, though.
Your criticism of it, though, with it being too much in the details, is that what you said, like of the murders themselves? Or what was it that you said?
All I said was there's so much focus on the details of each murder that the conclusion feels rushed.
Okay. Now, I can kind of say that I do think that you have a bit of a standing point there. Harvey Keitel's character, which is Detective Harvey of all people. I was waiting for it to be Detective King, but it was not. It was Detective Dyer, I think was her name. But anyway, Detective Harvey's like writing this stuff off as like, oh, they're not connected. And then finally at the end, he's like, oh, they're connected. Like, dude, you just sat there and listened to these stories and we can clearly, as the reader, see they're connected. And this detective kind of blows it off. But then at the end, he's like, okay, I think you've got something there, detective, but just focus on the here and now. We'll end up finding out who actually did it. And then, of course, they have the chance meeting with Randy, I think is his name, Aaron Paul's character at the end. The other thing that I kind of dug, I mean, it wasn't that big of a part of the story, but Detective Dyer, Regina King, she's kind of treated as like, you know, the woman. And, hey, I've got things from here.
They did nothing with that, by the way.
Well, they did one thing. They did one thing, and that's when they went to the VFW. And that was the only thing I could really say. They go to the VFW.
You're going to make a big deal about her being a woman in a man's world of homicide. There needed to be more done with that. Like, this, this needed 2 or 3 more issues to kind of flesh things out a bit.
The story wasn't that, though. It wasn't that. That was just kind of like a small element to it.
But don't introduce things and then not do anything with it.
Well, it's 1991. I mean, most likely this is 2022 when this is getting written. The guy who's writing this, who was it again? Jeff McComsey is like, Jeff's like, this girl power shit's been done to death. I'm going to throw a little bit in there, but I'm not going to have it be a panel
of her walking through the police department and her getting side-eyed would have been fine.
Okay. And that kind of happens when she walks in. They're like, hey, you're not supposed to be here or something. They don't really say that, but like, hey, can I help you, ma'am?
Right. And then Harvey Keitel is like, she's with me. And that's the end of it.
Well, all right. Anyway, her showing up at the VFW and her showing her armed forces card that she served. It was kind of like the way to pay that off is the only thing I could think of. What I disliked, okay, the criticism that I have, I think the dueling car dealerships is weird. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I mean, for Medford, PA, to have two dueling car dealerships that result in a murder and the Aryan Brotherhood, it's just crazy. But you know, I love the fact that these bozos in this small town think they can get away with this. I can put out a hit on somebody and I can get away with it. No, I don't know. I don't know about all that. Anyway, that's kind of all I had. It was a decent story. You know, we're following these 2 detectives trying to figure out how this, and we follow the story of these 3 bodies, how they end up dead, and then kind of like the resolution of things at the end. So I had a good time. I mean, this takes place in the early 90s. Nice little period of story, kind of like what you were saying. It's cool to see these actors. James Caan, by the way, is the dude that plays John Romano. That's definitely James Caan paying the Giamatti's character to go kill what's his face, and that's Ed Harris as the fucking bodyguard for the successful car dealership guy. Mm-hmm. Ed Harris, James Caan, Paul Giamatti,
fucking for Vendetta.
Bit part by Morgan Freeman. He has one line.
I really like this book. This is my favorite of the three that we did. The other two being Bad Weekend and Slots. I wanted more. You know, sometimes we read these books and like by the end of it, I'm like, please, I just want this to be over. Like, I've got it. This is being beat to death. You know, kind of like my my current obsessions when we talk about podcasts. Like, please stop talking about the same shit, Rattledge. I feel like some of the comic books that we read, these just get beaten to death. And this one, I was like legit wanting. I read this first thing this morning, and I wanted more. Like, this clocks in, I think it's 4 issues, and this clocks in at, you can't see how many pages this is. You know what? Let me look at Goodreads. I think it's like 122 pages, and I'm like, that is a short read. Like normally,
Really
by the end of it, I'm just glad to be done with it. This one, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe there's no more book left. I was bummed. I was legitimately bummed. I wish there was more.
There's some great use of just panels with no dialogue, which is fine. I mean, that's what you get in a movie.
Sure.
You get a lot of scenes without dialogue, and that makes it go by quick because you can go and you can follow the pace of this story. If there's 2 or 3 pages without dialogue, you can have those pages read within 30 seconds and know where you're at. And that's also, what does make it.
Also, like, there's some dialogue that's from a television set that I'm like, I don't need to read this.
Oh, yeah. The shit. Well, they were definitely like, hey, it's the early 90s. We're going into the Persian Gulf War or whatever it was. The Gulf War, ladies and gentlemen. That was the only thing that I could think of.
Hey, I got a pitch for you. Next time,
let me hear it.
The next time you deign to record with me in 6 months.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. No, just kidding.
I can only do. You're like the that one fucking TikTok. It's just like, I don't have the energy for you today.
All right. Well, hey, yeah, I agree with you, Mark. This was a fun book, and I think of the 3, I'll agree with you. This is probably, you had them ranked perfectly, in my opinion. Slots, Bad Weekend, going up to The Fourth Man as the top. Good choices, good reads. Let's get into plugs here. Let's talk about what's happening on the Rattledge Broadcasting Network during the week. This will be airing, this is airing on March 27th. Doesn't look like we have a whole lot scheduled during that week.
Yeah, so in the evening, we will be doing our Damn You Hollywood for John Wick 4. And the reason why we're doing it on Monday instead of Tuesday, I will be at Skid Row and Buck Cherry because I do, in fact, love the cocaine.
Oh, my goodness. You love the Cocaine Bear.
I do love the Cocaine Bear. I love the cocaine and the Cocaine Bear. Mama, can you wait?
Oh.
And then on Thursday, unless I'm forced to be social, we will be doing a history of boxing, probably an extended version of the history of boxing, because this was originally designed as 2 parts, because there's 4 fights to talk about. But instead, we're just going to probably just do one long podcast. Manny Pacquiao versus Juan Manuel Marquez. What's great about this one is this is the series of fights that nearly killed Manny Pacquiao. Juan Manuel Marquez hit Manny Pacquiao so hard it sounded like he'd been shot.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, it's rough. People thought Manny Pacquiao was dead. D-E-D, dead. It's pretty fucking amazing. So we're going to talk about that this Thursday, in theory. In theory. Hey, I will have just gotten back from Cleveland, by the way.
Oh, what are you heading up there for?
We were supposed to go on a sexy Vegas trip. We decided to get off the crazy train because the people going to the sexy Vegas trip were all nuts.
Oh.
So we decided to not do that anymore. However, it turns out that Life of Agony is doing a tour with Sick of It All.
Oh.
And other than this one punk rock show they did yesterday, they were not coming to Florida. So I sent my wife, I was like, hey, look at this. Life of Agony is touring, but they're not coming anywhere close to Florida. She goes, but they're coming to Cleveland. And I have a friend in Cleveland that I want to go see. And I was like, okay, sure. So we canceled our trip, our Sexy Vegas trip, and instead of do a Sexy Cleveland trip so that I can go see Life of Agony and she can go see her friend.
Nice.
So I will just be coming back from that trip and then doing John Wick 4. You'll be airing this Fourth Man review.
Gotcha. All right.
Actually, hang on. As I'm saying this, we've just gotten back from Cleveland. This already happened.
Oh boy.
This happened yesterday. Then. This happened this past weekend.
Oh, well, I hope you enjoyed your trip to Ohio yet again.
Yes. Yep. It was great.
Have yourself a pierogi.
We had a good time.
All right. Good deal. Good deal.
This already happened.
That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, go check out the Rattledge Broadcasting Network. Give that a like on Facebook. Stay up on top of all the great podcasts that the Rattledge Broadcasting Network has to offer. Mark Rattledge, I know you listen to the Source Material Comics podcast. I want to thank you for being on here for this trilogy of books that we have discussed. Worked our way up to, go back in the archive. You can hear us talk about Slots, and you can also hear us talk about Bad Weekend. And now we just finished up The Fourth Man. Also, right here on the Source Material Comics feed, you can hear us talk about the 90s comics. That's right, the 90s comics. With the Unspoken Decade, we have the Unspoken Issues. And it's me, Dean Derry, or me, Evan Bevins, Chris Armstrong, all sorts of fun people talking 90s comics. That's right here on the feed. Last Unspoken Issues episode, according to the calendar here, would have been a little discussion with Dean and his significant other, Emily, on Sandman Mystery Theater. Mark, you like crime? You might want to check that out sometime. It's actually a neat little crime story. It took place in the 40s featuring the Sandman, not the one from Amazing Spider-Man. No, this is DC's Sandman. Noir, Mark Radulich, noir. Not rawr, noir. That being said, we are getting out of here. That's Mark Radulich. I'm Jesse Starcher. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.
Devil's Highway.
I don't even know. V for Vendetta.
Watchmen. Fuck Firestorm.
Good old Al Moore. Al Moore. I call him Al because he's my buddy, you know.
Yeah. Speaking of hard, please continue these plugs. Where my wife is currently laying is in front of my bookshelf. When I go to put my books back, I'm going to put my crotch directly in her face.
Oh,
just
goodness.
I know that. Please make sure that's in the gag reel.
There'll probably be in her gag reel as well.
Maybe just leave this recording so that you can hear what's about to happen, and you can put it in the gag reel.
You're going to get hit in the nuts is what's going to happen.
Yeah, what you're going to hear is, will you get out of my face? Ow, why?
Yeah,
right
hey.
in the powdered donut.
Ew.
I now refer to myself as Cafe Du Monde, by the way.
I'm going to have to ask for an explanation, unfortunately.
Okay, so at Cafe Du Monde, they overpowder their beignets.
Okay, what's a beignet?
It's a French pastry.
Beignet. How do you spell that? B-E-N-A or B-E-N-E?
Yeah, there's a G in there somewhere.
Oh, there's a fucking G. Bye-bye, baby, bye-bye.
Do you have any usable material in that entire...
I'm sure we can get at least 15 minutes. I told you 22 minutes is the perfect length of a podcast.
That's what she said.
Well, she might, depending on how much of your crotch is in her face. They say 22 minutes is all I can stand. And I can't stand no more.
No more.